Good day and welcome to this online policy dialogue, a change on wheels towards smart and sustainable transport, organized by the European Policy Center and supported by Amazon. My name is Stefan Sipka. I'm head of EPC's Sustainable Prosperity for Europe program, and I'll be moderating this event, which is also part of the EPC's Green Deal for Real series of discussions. So today we'll discuss our transport system, our mobility. As we all know from our experience, the transport we use is often fragmented, it can be costly, it can be insecure, but it also has a significant climate and environmental footprint. The EU is trying to address the matter with its strategy on smart and sustainable mobility, adopted 4 years ago, with objectives up until 2050 and more than 80 concrete measures to make this vision become reality. But of course, the starting point is to set these goals, introduce the legislation, but we also need to walk the talk. And this is what we'll discuss today, where we are with this transformation of our transport system, both for our passengers as well as freight transport, and what more needs to be done to make this vision become a reality. First, we will hear introductory remarks from our panelists. We have 3 panelists with us today. And then it will be followed by quick reactions from our respondents, and then we will move on to the Q&A session. I would, however, like to encourage our participants to write their questions as soon as they can, so we can address as many questions as possible by the end of this discussion. So I'll briefly introduce our panel speakers. I would like to welcome Pablo Fabregas Martinez, Deputy Head of Cabinet to European Commissioner for Transport, Adina Valean, Steph Cornelis, Director for Electric Fleets, Transport and Environment, and Miriam Gonzalo, Head of E-Electrification, Amazon. Thank you for joining this discussion. And without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Pablo Fabregas Martinez for your opening remarks. I believe you're muted, Pablo.
Hello, good morning to everyone, and thanks for this invitation and to allow us from the Commission point of view, from the Commission to allow us to elaborate on this very interesting subject. As you said, I'm Deputy Head of Cabinet of Commissioner Valean. And you already mentioned in your, Stefan, in your introductory remarks to this seminar that most of the actions of the transport portfolio were reflected in the Smart and Mobility strategy, which we presented in 2020, where we set up the plan of action for the next 4 years. I will not be able to elaborate a lot on what we are planning for this year. As you know, this is the last year of the mandate, and the level of legislation that is being proposed is very limited. The good news is that when it comes to road transport, which is the main subject today, a lot has been done in the 4 last years. And if you allow me, I would like to make a very quick overview of what we have. What we did propose on the smart and sustainable strategy, and what we have delivered in these 4 years, and maybe what is pending or what might need still some work to do. I think these 4 years has been very intense in terms of for the co-legislators to agree on new legislation, and I think now we will be shifting towards implementation of this, which is not evident. And this, I think, it's the most challenging right now for the years ahead. So when it comes to the smart and sustainable strategy, there we all of our actions when it comes to greening road transport were based, well, not just road, but all modes of transport were based on first reducing the dependency we have on fossil fuels. And there we were targeting first the create and replace the new fleets of low zero emission vehicles, but also boost new alternative fuels. This is maybe less relevant for road, where electrification is certainly one of the most promising ways to decarbonize road transport. I'll stop afterwards. I'll just present the main three areas where we have intervened and in order to decarbonize all transport modes. Second, we are also making a heavy push towards pushing both passengers and freight towards more sustainable modes of transport, be inland waterways, rail transport, but also ensure a more integrated multimodal system. And then third big area of activity from our side has been to create the right incentives to promote this change from road transport, which accounts currently of 70% of all transport emissions. So a big responsibility for the sector, and these are the three main axes of action that we have done. When it comes to reduce the dependencies of fossil fuels, the three big pieces of legislation we have proposed, which are not of my remit, of my commissioner, but is still very important. They were framed in the 55 package, and this is the regulations on CO2 for cars, regulations for vans and trucks, and also less important in terms of emissions, but also to reduce, with the aim to reduce pollution from road transport, the new rules on Euro 7, which have co-legislators recently agreed on a deal on the 18th of December. So here, as you probably all know, the aim of the CO2 regulations for cars is to have all car vehicles zero emission by 2035. And this has been provisionally agreed by the co-legislators. We need to finalize that file. For trucks, the dates are a bit, we've given a bit more time. We aim for 2040, and with a bit of exceptions, because for trucks, it's not as easy as it is for car. The development also of alternative is not as mature, and there will always be some minor segments where probably will be very, very difficult to phase away from combustion engine dynamics. When it comes also to boosting not just vehicles, but alternative fuels, here the renewable directive has been modified in order to increase more use of biofuels. Not related to transport, but for aviation and maritime, there we have proposed two big important files to create new alternative fuels. Those are two sectors hard to decarbonize, because the alternatives to combustion to CO2 to fossil fuels, sorry, it's more difficult. But because the focus here today is on road, let me just elaborate a bit more on the third leg of how to try to reduce our dependency of fossil fuels, which is infrastructure. So as I said earlier, one of the most promising ways of decarbonizing road is certainly electrification. And there we have proposed a very specific regulation. AFIR, we had previously a directive, which we have now converted into a regulation, the Alternative Fuel Infrastructure Regulation, which, again, this is already law, and where we are trying to set up minimum electric charging stations, but also hydrogen along the TEN-T network, and this already by the end of 2025 and also by 2030. So we want to have one of the problems we see in boosting the increase of electric vehicles is the missing infrastructure. Consumers need to be reassured that they're going to find a recharging point along the motorway. So this is something we have worked on two sides. First, on legislation, in trying to oblige member states, not trying, but obliging member states to deploy and roll out infrastructure along the TEN-T, Trans-European network. And for this, we also have engaged substantially with financing. We have 1.5 billion dedicated from the Connecting Your facility to the rollout of both electric charging points, but also hydrogen points. And I was just looking at the figures recently, and we have managed to finance more than 500 recharging points and more than 2,000 of hydrogen stations with these funds. We intend to do the same in the next 2 years with an additional 700 million. So this is also some important activity from the Commission side to try to increase the number of those stations along the network. And here, I would also like to make reference when it comes to incentives. That we have proposed. First of all, we managed to conclude the review of the Eurovignette Directive, which is a very important piece of legislation, which tries to translate the polluter use paid principle into road. And there it has been a mega shift of paradigm. Before the Eurovignette Directive, just a word on what it is exactly for those that are not familiar with it. It's the legal framework by which road trucks are charged for using motorways or roads. And we have moved from some member states were still using charging schemes by time, by duration, weekly, yearly, and we are moving towards a distance base, which is very important because it reflects better the fact that those who pollute the more will need to contribute more for the use of the infrastructure. We're also introducing here incentives and discounts for vehicles that are CO2 emissions. And we're moving towards a system which was based on pollutants, on NOx to CO2 emissions. So the more the truck emits, the more he's supposed to pay for using the infrastructure. Then a critical element also to reduce emissions, it's our ETS system, the European system by which CO2s are charged, and here transport was only included partially, aviation was included partially. We have included maritime, but one of the big novelties is also including road transport. So road transport will also be part of the ETS system, and this is the major incentive for road manufacturers, for road users to try to shift to vehicles which are not dependent on CO2 or are much more efficient, because then they will be paying less. There is an important caveat here, because we expect, of course, not just this to have an effect on professionals, but also on citizens. And this is why the Commission accompanied its proposal with the Climate Social Fund, which foresees that part of the revenues that would be created by introducing the ETS for road will be also dedicated for citizens that are suffering the impact of moving towards, for instance, electrification. And this is an important element in order to also ensure that the transition is sustainable, not just in environmental terms, but also socially. And so this is, in essence, what we have done. We also have created new incentives in a very recent proposal from July last year, which is the weight and dimensions. Here we have seen that electrification in cars is happening as we speak at a different speed in different member states. But when for the heavy duty vehicles, this is a bit more difficult. And one of the problems we find is that trucks and long distance trucks will have much more weight if they turn into electric engines. And in order to compensate this increase of weight, we are towards allowing for those trucks to be much more heavier to compensate, so that the truck manufacturers and hauliers see an incentive of using this, because obviously if the batteries are are very heavy and reduce the load pay, then there is no interest for the industry to shift towards those vehicles. And so this is also another proposal which is accompanying the whole set of measures we introduced with the CO2 for trucks, and which we also think will contribute to a faster transition towards electrification, but also hydrogen. I mean, there are also provisions in this regulation which facilitate the hydrogen engines for trucks. I think I've gone more or less throughout the most important proposals. I've left a couple of them, but I intend this to be a dialogue, and I'm happy to take questions and comments and react on those if you don't mind. So Stefan, back to you. I'm available for any comment and questions you might have. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Pablo, for this overview of where we are, especially with the when it comes to the objectives of the Smart Sustainable Mobility Strategy and its implementation. And as you said, the importance of zero-emission vehicles, alternatives to road transport, multimodal transportation, and a number of measures, instruments, as you described, regulation, and financial incentives to make this vision become a reality. Thank you for now, and of course I'll be happy to come back to some of the points you made further during the discussion. Thank you, and now I would like to turn to Steph Cornelis for your introductory remarks. Please, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much, Stefan, and hello, everyone. And first of all, also thank you for having me here. I prepared a short presentation, so I will share my screen with you, and I will take you through mostly the challenges, but also the opportunities that are actually ahead in terms of moving to a smarter and more sustainable transport system. So let me first share my screen. There you go. Should be okay now.
Yes,
yes.
We can see the presentation. Yes, now it's in a presentation mode. Yes, perfect.
Wonderful. Okay, so so I said in my presentation I would like to focus on first the opportunities, first the challenges with regards to moving towards this smart, sustainable transport system, but then also focus on further opportunities. And the further opportunity that we see is a faster electrification of fleets, and why Europe also needs to take action in this regard. So starting with the challenges. So the challenges ahead are that we are facing today, but we are also facing for tomorrow and the years ahead are threefold. The first one is the climate challenge. A new analysis of the European Commission has showed that we're currently behind schedule in meeting our 2030 targets. So that means that we need that we hit our goals. Now, this will never happen unless we manage to really reverse the trends that we see currently in the transport sector, and I'm talking here about the greenhouse gas emissions, per sector. So as you can see here, the transport sector, the emissions in the transport sector are not going down, and that is actually in strong contrast with some of the other sectors in Europe. So we need to accelerate emission cuts and to make sure we meet our targets in 2030, but that we cannot achieve without curbing emissions of the transport sector. Now, given that the emissions in that segment are not going down, that means that the problem will only get bigger. Our estimation actually shows that, and that's what you see on the right, that by 2030, almost 45, so almost half of the total emissions will come from the transport sector. So you see actually that share of the transport sector in the total emissions is only getting bigger. So that means that the challenge is only getting bigger and the urgency is also only getting bigger to cut emissions in this sector. Apart from 2030, there's also already a discussion ongoing on 2040. Commissioner Hoekstra has already expressed his support for setting a -90, so that's an overall target in 2040, so a new climate target. So what would that mean? What would that actually mean for the transport sector? And that is what we are discussing here today, is that we need further emission cuts, so that we need to go to almost 70% by 2040 in order to make sure that we hit that target. So all in all, I would say the challenge is there, what we really need to do is accelerate the emission cuts. And one of the most effective ways to achieve that is by accelerating also the shift to zero emission technologies. Mr. Martinez has already mentioned, for example, the CO2 standards for light duty vehicles that have been introduced, the ICE phase out in 2035. So we really need to continue to accelerate that shift to zero emission vehicles. The second challenge is the social challenge. I think what is really important is that in that shift and in that new dynamic where we need to go faster, we need to make sure that we do not that we leave no one behind, and that we do not also lose political support for the European Green Deal. And one of the most effective ways is to make sure that we democratize the electric vehicle, so that we make electric vehicles accessible to many more in Europe and not only for the happy few. Now, one of the most effective ways to do that is actually by focusing on the used car market. 8 out of 10, or almost 8 out of 10 European citizens, you see that here on the right of the slide, are actually buying used cars. They're not buying new cars. So this is the market where they're basically buying the vehicle that they're going to use to drive to work or to go on holidays. So it's really important that we manage to accelerate not only the electrification of the new car market, but also the used car market. Last but not least is also, of course, the industrial challenge. The automotive sector is an important employee, also here in Europe. Most effective ways, or the most effective way to achieve that, is by making sure that the technology of tomorrow, which is electrification for cars, will be manufactured here in Europe. So that is an overview of the main challenges. What I will do in my second part is that I will give an overview of the reasons why we believe the EU needs to take stronger action on fleets. And then in my last part, I will show the effects, so why action on fleets and European action on fleets can help to overcome the challenges that I have described just before. So let me first start with the reasons. So I'll give you a quick overview of that. So first of all, why do we need to focus on fleets? So first of all, what is important to underline are actually not private cars. There are corporate cars, so-called company cars. Almost 6 out of 10 new cars in Europe are company cars or corporate vehicles. Because these cars drive much more, their mileage is much higher than a private car, they're actually responsible for 74% of emissions of new vehicles. So you see actually that there's a lot of potential here in getting emission cuts very quickly, or achieving that in a very fast way. Secondly, this is a sector that is actually enjoying massive tax cuts, also fossil fuel subsidy, given that a lot of these corporate vehicles are still, actually show that they still included the UK, but it showed, or it gives you a good idea about how much tax cuts company car drivers are actually getting in Europe. This is not just a thing that is typically Belgian. We have company cars in many countries in the European Union, and through VAT deductions or write-offs or a better benefiting kind system, company car drivers are actually enjoying a lot of tax deductions compared to people driving private car. Now, but what is actually remarkable and also alarming is that this market, which is the biggest automotive market, as I've shown before, is actually not leading on the shift to zero emission vehicles. On the European level, you see that the private segment is actually electrifying faster than the corporate segment. When you focus on the EU's two biggest car markets, so Germany and France, so what you see here on the right are the share of battery electric vehicles of new registrations. You see that actually also there the difference basically between private vehicles and corporate vehicles in terms of the uptake of electric cars is very, very high. So we really have a problem there. A last point is that this sector, so the corporate car segment, also really needs a push because they're not willing to move. Leasing companies are a very important part of corporate cars. 60% of corporate cars are actually owned by leasing companies, and they are massive companies who have huge fleets. They are owned by car makers or by banks. And as you can see here, just to give you a bit of an illustration how big they are, is that actually the top 7 leasing companies in Europe now account for 1 out of 3 new car sales. So they're a very, very big player. But what you see is that they do not want to move. They are not going faster in electrification than the EU market. And at the same time, not one leasing company has committed to phasing out fossil fuels. At the same time, we commissioned an undercover investigation that actually showed that in France, which is the biggest market for many of those leasing companies, the employees are actually pushing clients not to go for an electric vehicle, but to rather lease a fossil fuel or a hybrid car. So the sector has a lot of potential, and at the same time, it is not moving fast enough. The current initiatives and incentives on national level, and at the same time, you see that the sector itself is not moving. So that leads me to my last part of my presentation, and I wanted to quickly outline why EU action on fleets can help to overcome the challenges that I have outlined at the beginning of my presentation. So let me first start with the climate challenge. We have modeled a scenario where the EU would set a target that would make all new corporate cars electric by 2030. And what you see is that the effects are really, really high. It's really an opportunity to continue and to further supercharge electrification. So when you focus here on the green line in my presentation, you see that actually setting a target, the European target of making all new corporate cars electric by 2030, it would increase the share of new electric cars by 74% in 2030. So the main reasons why the effects are so high are multiple. So first of all, as I said, it's the biggest market, but at the same time, it's important also to underline that these cars have a very short ownership period. A private car is held for 10 years or even more. A corporate car is held for 3 to 4 years. So that means that the turnover of this market is much faster. So if you electrify this market, the effects will be much higher compared to electrifying the private market. And that also leads me to my second point. So the social challenge, because of the short ownership period, an electric company car will enter the used car market much faster after 3 to 4 years. So that means that if you set a target for new corporate cars, 100% in 2030, so the share of used zero emission vehicles in 2035 will increase by almost 80%. So all in all, it means that you make EVs accessible to many more, because these EVs are much more affordable, because they have depreciated, they've lost some of their value, but they're still very good cars after 3 to 4 years, and they enter the market where most Europeans are buying their vehicle. The last point is the industrial challenge. I think what is really important is that we create an ecosystem for e-mobility that creates investment certainty. We have now regulated the supply to the CO2 standards, but what is important is that we also regulate, or that we also push the demand to make sure that we have this puzzle, that we have this perfect puzzle, so to say, for e-mobility and e-mobility investments. And the image that you see here is just an illustration, but these are all battery projects, gigafactories, but a lot of them have only been announced. They have not been confirmed yet. And by creating another demand incentive, you can continue to create investment certainty, which will be really important, extremely important to attract investment to Europe. So my conclusions of my input today is the fact that the EU and the EU itself, but also member states, we need to continue, and we really need to accelerate transport emissions. While at the same time, it's important that we leave no one behind. And in that respect, fleet electrification has a lot of untapped potential. DG Move will come forward with a public consultation soon on how in Europe we can accelerate fleet electrification, and that really should be a first step for future legislation setting targets for fleets and also leasing companies, cars and vans to become 100% electric by 2030, the very latest. At the same time, electrification targets for HGV fleets can also bring substantial additional emission savings and should be part of the scope also of that public consultation. So there is a challenge. The challenges are multiple, but there are also solutions, and fleets can be a very important part of that solution. And that's also why, Europe should take action and make sure that we accelerate electrification in this segment too. Thank you for your attention. So that's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steph, for your intervention. I think it's a nice also the nice addition also to what we heard from Pablo previously. And as said, you mentioned three key challenges when it comes to transition to sustainable transport, including the climate challenge, social challenges, industrial challenge, and also stressing the importance of electrification when it comes to corporate car fleets, but also used cars. And again, happy to come back to some of these points afterwards. Thank you. And now I would like to give the floor to Miriam Gonzalo for your introductory remarks.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Thank you for the invite. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. As Stefan said before, I lead the electrification within Amazon Logistics for Europe. And in a nutshell, that means that my team supports the decarbonization of the transportation network. That sounds can be summarized in a sentence, but then executing is a little bit more challenging, as Stefan and Paulo already shared. So I would like to, I don't have slides. I'm going to walk you through what we have done from Amazon on the decarbonization of the transportation to date. I would like to cover what else are we doing in the incoming years, and then I would like to end up with some of the challenges that we have already faced on that execution as we execute at pace. So let me go back to 2019. So it was not the first step, but it was a big commitment that Amazon made when we co-founded the Climate Pledge. And we made a commitment to become a net zero carbon company by 2040. And that's a bold commitment, and that's 10 years before the Paris Agreement. And that means that we need to really work in multiple fronts to make that happen. But as Steph mentioned already, transportation is one of the key points to make that transition happen. And I will talk about that today because that's my remit. So on the transportation, what have we done so far? So if we think about transportation network in a company such as Amazon, I would like you to imagine what is the pathway or the supply chain for a product that goes from a seller to a customer doorstep to any of our houses. So all the different transportation methods that you can imagine that needs to be decarbonized. And in Amazon, we separate in kind of 3 miles. We call the first mile from the seller warehouse, so the long distances to Amazon warehouse, the first mile. And we're already working, that's one of the most challenging. We're already working there with transportation through the sea. So there are some examples in the Mediterranean Sea where we are already using hybrid ships with some of the partners that we have, and we're already reducing emissions because the trucks that will go around the road from Italy to Spain and the other way around can be transported in these hybrid ships, and that gets a lot of reductions on the emissions of the CO2 emissions. Once the trucks are in the land again, that's what we call the middle mile. I think Pablo was mentioning that is a complex, heavy duty vehicles is a complex segment, and potentially the maturity of technology is less evolved as the last mile. But we already have 40 trucks, electric trucks within Germany and the UK to pioneer, to test ourselves where are the challenges, and to see where are the opportunities also that we can leverage. And then coming to the last mile, so the vans or the micro-mobility that you can see around closer to us in the streets, there are already more than 3,000 electric vans in Europe by the end of 2023 that our delivery service partners have on road. And also there are more than 20 cities in Europe with micro-mobility solutions. So we not only work and rely on the four-wheelers, we keep innovating and supporting other modes of transport that are less impactful for the environment, but also for all of us walking and living in the cities. And that's where we are today. So we are definitely committed to make this happen, and we are walking the talk, as you said before, Stefan. And in that sense, what's coming in 2022, we also committed to invest more than 1 billion in Europe in the incoming years to keep decarbonizing the transportation network and keep growing that and supporting our delivery service partners to decarbonize the fleet. And for that, I think it is really important to walk the talk. Is really important. All the regulations, the European Green Deal foundations that is in place today, but it's also important to make that happen. And that's what we would like to see in the incoming years, is how those regulations, that framework is implemented, and how that framework is implemented in a harmonized way across the different European member states. That would be important because Steph was mentioning not leaving anyone behind, can also apply to the member states, because at the end of the day, when we think about transportation is big and it goes across borders. And if we really think about providing the best service to the customers and to really focus on a sustainable transportation network, potentially we need to step up and back and look at a harmonized transition. Some challenges that the transition, I would say opportunities, I don't like to call them challenges, that this transition will bring. First of all, if we think about the logistics sector, and again, I will focus on what I know, I think it is important to understand how it is built up. The logistics sector is built up out of small and medium enterprises. So we need to think about how these companies face the transition and the effort they need to do to make that transition happen. One of the efforts is changing the technology they use on the transportation, changing from internal combustion engine vehicles to electric vehicles or alternative fuel vehicles. Those vehicles are not at, potentially they don't have yet the same range as we can have in internal combustion engine vehicles. Definitely they are not at the price of acquisition as the internal combustion engine vehicles, and that can be a problem, a rock that these SMEs needs to overcome. And potentially by investing on making that supply closer to the European markets and making those vehicles being manufactured in Europe can definitely help to overcome that barrier. And apart from that, if we think about optimizing operations and avoiding the transportation network to have another burden on the operations, it is really important to have the right infrastructure on road to make sure that if the range of the batteries are not big enough, it's not long enough for the routes of the transportation network operators, we have the right charging points or refueling points along the European roads. And with that comes the power, and that's something that is really important. So if we want a charging network of high power chargers for the trucks to charge fast and to avoid the impact in the operational timing, the power needs to be there. And the grid is not transparent in terms of showing and allowing us who are installing those charge points to understand whether the capacity is there or not until you enter in a long administrative process. And that might stop investments or actually delay investments, because it's a little bit of a chicken and egg, how the transportation, how the investment in vehicles is going to be there if we do not know when the power to charge those vehicles is going to be available and where that power is going to be available. So as I said, there are opportunities, more to do. I think we are facing and we are going in the right direction. I agree, acceleration is needed, and that's what we are here to make it happen.
Thank you very much, Miriam, for your introductory remarks, and also sharing some of the insights about your work also in helping to make our mobility system more sustainable with electrification, the 3 miles concept as you explained it, and also highlighting the challenges when it comes to scaling up this effort, also to really make our entire transport and mobility systems more sustainable, namely on switching to new tech, changing the engines, for example, having the right infrastructure on the road, and ensuring that we have the power we need to charge the vehicles. And of course, this brings us to the other topics, other agendas, such as the energy agenda. And of course, we can't look at the system in a silo, but we need to consider the conditions, how we can make this transition happen. Thank you, and thanks to all the panelists for your first round of interventions. I would now like to introduce our first respondent, Thomas Lim, Policy Advisor for Mobility from Eurocities. And if you could share, say, your some of the points or comments as per what the panelists have said, and additional reflections on the topic, that would be great.
Thank you very much, Stefan, and thank you to all the speakers for your initial statements. So I just to quickly introduce myself, I work for Eurocities, so the network of the largest European cities. So to react on what has just been said, so I agree that since the publication of the smart and sustainable mobility strategy, a lot has happened. We've been busy for the last 2 years working on a lot of files and dossiers that have an impact on urban mobility, especially from our perspective. So now we've seen a lot of focus on vehicles, on fuels, on infrastructure. We'll probably also have to think in the future, if we really want to reach our climate, environmental targets, about behavior, having really also an impact on behavior. And this is, I guess, what will also allow us to go the extra mile when it comes to reaching those targets. We have actually one main regret when we had the publication of this strategy, is that the word actually model shift was absent from this strategy. So I hope that in the next year and under the next EU mandate, we'll see more actions in that regard. Of course, there were some interesting initiatives that also try to offer interesting alternatives for passengers, for freight transport. But we probably need to do a little bit more, because as Stefan was mentioning, if you just look at the CO2 emissions from the transport sector, we see a rebound, and there are probably different reasons for this rebound in the CO2 emissions from the transport sector. One of them is also probably that this is fueled by transport demand. So we'll maybe in the next year, if we really want to achieve this objective, we'll probably need to support a little bit more some sectors. I know that Annika from UITP is speaking right after me. I wish we could see a lot of support also for the public transport sector, for instance, because this will also help us really to offer to people credible alternatives to move within cities, but also between cities. I hope that thanks to some important milestones also that were reached under this mandate, like the TNT, the agreement on the TNT regulation, will also have more train alternatives in Europe, so that long distance transport by rail becomes a reality and also affordable for many, because this is also something that we've seen that we obviously have to combine the sustainable transition with a fair element. Otherwise, we risk losing people and losing people's support. So there are different tools available. So Steph also briefly mentioned the impact of national taxation tools. They will have also an impact. We probably need also to see more leadership from the European Commission when it comes to incentivizing really member states to do much more to change behaviors, to offer to make sustainable transport modes more affordable. Sorry. And this will definitely help us. So when it comes to our perspective from the cities, we probably also need more help to make urban mobility more sustainable. Cities, for instance, have shown a lot of ambition when it comes to reducing the impact of transport, but not only from a climate perspective, but from an environmental perspective, by reducing the impact, the space also of taken by motorized vehicles in cities. So we'll probably also need to see some more support in this, just for instance, by helping cities to implement low emission zones, by showing them the potential tools that and the solutions that have worked in the past. I'm not going to extend too much for the moment, but if you have any questions afterwards, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Thomas, for your reaction, and just to pick on some of the points you made on the importance of shifts to also different alternative mobility models, and the importance of public transportation in particular. That we need to see how we can make the transition happen, also to when it comes to the usage of this mode of transportation, and also what the cities need, that they need more support indeed. And we can of course discuss this further on, and when we also come back to the panelists. Thank you. And I would now like to invite Peter Dolacey, if you could provide your reaction as to what we heard from the panelists, and any additional comments you would like to make.
Thank you, Stefan. I hope you hear me well, and good morning to everyone. My name is Peter Dolacey, representing ASEA, European Car Manufacturers Association. Okay, 2 minutes, as I was requested for a short, let's say, remarks on what was said. Okay, so I try to be really short. Okay, first, as Pablo mentioned, okay, I think that we had an avalanche of legislative acts recent 2 years. And really now it should be about the implementation, and really see, okay, how we can make it how make it reality. And what I would like to stress, this is not only about the green transformation, this is also about digital. And this is very often forgotten in our case as automotive. Okay, switching to different powertrains is not such a big deal, okay, but it depends on a number of elements. But really the digital move is something that really we are in a global race. We are competing with digital giants in China, in the US, etc. And really this needs to be reflected, that this is really a dual transformation. So for us, really critical is now to have a look how we can do that, about really ensuring that we as industry can deliver that. It was mentioned here, one of the critical elements for decarbonization is the infrastructure issue. I don't want to repeat what Miriam mentioned, but really, you know well that we were not very happy about the proposal and the outcomes, because we see that insufficient even now. And of course, if we have ideas to go beyond that, that might be probably mission impossible. Let's be very frank in between us. The second point is for us really keeping the manufacturing in Europe. And really for that, we are really lacking some kind of a really consistent perspective on industrial policy in Europe that really is supporting to produce and use the green technologies in Europe. We know that, again, we are lacking behind. There are plenty of inconsistencies and missing points that really are causing a problem for the industry. One of those elements within that is area of skills and competencies. This is something that we would like to switch to green technologies, but we don't have people for that. And okay, it takes enormous time to educate people for a new competencies, for the new products, for the new use of those products. And going back to digitalization of production, Industry 4.0, this is enormous challenge that is very often forgotten, and we focus only, let's say, on environmental issues, but we don't have people that can do that. Second big block of comments, yes, okay, we have 100% target in 2035. Heavy duty is close to that. But for me, critical debate is missing. But what we are going to do with the rest, okay? Even if we have 100% new cars electric, it does not mean that the emissions from the road transport will decrease. This is a question mark that we need to really start discussing how to do the residual part, which might be more and more significant. If we have a look on affordability, on let's say more and more, let's say, increasing age of the new vehicles, that will be an issue. So this is the whole questions, how we deal with the fuels, about taxation, about, let's say, also the model balancing, as was mentioned here, public transport, you know, switch to railways, all that, because really 100% target does not mean that we will have a zero emission from the road transport, and this would require a very substantial debate. A part of the debate is on smart. I think we see that especially a link to the decarbonization of the energy carriers, mostly electricity. Makes no sense, and we cannot reach the overall decarbonization without decarbonizing the energy sector. We know that the speeds that, okay, is required from the industry, 2030, 35, definitely will not be the same pace for the electricity sector. And smart, okay, definitely will be more than happy to go in that direction. But again, I would like to echo what Maria mentioned. Okay, it is nice vision to have smart charging of heavy duties in coming years. It's utopia. We all know that this will not happen very quickly, because we don't have the capacity of the grids. We don't have, let's say, the capacity of the parking points that will be equipped for that, and all related issues. And, you know, permission procedures will take years. So for us, this is also something that we need to consider significantly, how to enable the electrification of the transport, but we have other sectors to step in. And the last point, in general, where I do not have any magic solution, is really how to make all those zero technologies affordable. This is not only about vehicles, this is also about, let's say, smart charging from the home, photovoltaics, etc. Let's be also very frank, it is enormously expensive. We all live here in Brussels in a bubble that, okay, we are all fine, but okay, we need to go everywhere and every single country and enable those technologies to be widespread use. And if we have a look on our sector, it is not easy really to make a cheap electric cars in Europe. It is depending on a number of issues and elements that are missing in Europe that are pretending us to make it affordable. It's not only, as I said, not only about cars, but about the whole ecosystem of green technologies that fit together, and we need to ways how to make them affordable for everyone. And I stop there, and of course, more than happy to come back to the discussion or any questions. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much. Yeah, so we heard from Peter de Lacy, Mobility and Sustainable Transport Director from the European Automobile Manufacturers Association. Great to hear your also comments, and namely on the importance of ensuring that we have the skills we need for this transition, to take into account emissions from residuals even after electrification, the challenge when it comes to shifting to new infrastructure, and ensuring also reliable energy sector to power the new sustainable transport and vehicles. Thank you, and of course, happy to discuss further some of the points you made. And now I would like, last but not least, I would like to give the floor to Annika Degen, Deputy Director, Senior Policy Expert for Digitalization and Ticketing International Association of Public Transport, for your quick reactions to what was said thus far. Please, the floor.
Hi, good morning, I can still say, and thank you for this interesting event. It's a great pleasure to be part of it. Yeah, you introduced UATP. It's the International Association of Public Transport. We represent the public transport operators and authorities, mostly of the larger European cities, but also private ones. And we have always said, you know, when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions, there are three possible ways to reduce them: avoid, shift, and improve. And we have had the feeling that over the past decade, and even before, the attention of Europe was mostly on improving and developing the new technologies and really pushing for the new technologies such as electromobility, which is a very important part of the puzzle, but it's not the only one. And we feel like in the next term, more focus should probably be on avoiding transport. I know it's not very popular, but really looking at how to reduce unnecessary trips, how to maybe pool trips more together. And here public transport can of course help, and also the shift to the more sustainable modes. At the urban and regional level, it would be public transport and active modes. And first of all, I want to say, for the next legislative term, we are hearing left and right some criticism now about the Green Deal, because I think now you have paved the way. I think the Green Deal is a fantastic strategy and it's absolutely needed. But now it's being criticized because people can start to feel the effects of the legislation that comes with the implementation, and it's not easy for everyone. But I think one of our messages must be to keep up the Green Deal objectives and to keep working in that direction. And of course, not to forget the social dimension, leaving no one behind. Here again, public transport can really help for daily mobility, for commuters, because it is affordable and inclusive. It provides some mobility for everyone. And I agree that it must be combined more with other modes locally, so that we have a good network and a good alternative to each one owning their own car, especially if electric cars are more expensive. The slides that the colleagues from T&E showed, they showed very well that rail and bus transport produce hardly any greenhouse gas emissions. You could hardly see them in the graphs. So I think the shift to bus and rail transport can really be one part of the puzzle as well. So we ask Europe to keep supporting public transport development, empower the local authorities in the cities, work with them more, keep developing urban rail systems. They are high capacity, they are very, very effective and efficient in cities. They can transport most people and most quickly. And here, you know, we need more of the Connecting Europe facility, funding for urban rail as well, because most trips, railway trips, are actually done at the local and urban level and in the regions, and not so much long distance if you look at the numbers. For the e-buses, we are well on track. We have legislation and it's almost finalized to have even more e-buses with the CO2 standards. We have been very constructive in the discussion because the operators need time to set up the infrastructure. We are absolutely willing to do it, but we need also the skilled people to do it. And of course, the money has to come from somewhere, because if everybody is constructing the infrastructure at the same time, the prices for it actually go up. So this is a problem we have to solve. And one big issue that nobody probably thinks about in the context of decarbonization is staff shortage. If we want to expand public transport services, and we already confronted with staff shortage, which leads to the cancellation of certain trips because there are no drivers. And this will only get worse because many of our company's current staff is going in retirement soon, and it's very difficult to recruit young drivers and young people in general. So this can actually risk, our opportunity to step in and to play our part in the transformation. So we have to talk about staff shortage and how to solve it. I mentioned that most trips actually happen at local and regional level, so there's a high potential to look at that level, the daily commuters, the daily mobility, and how this can be changed to become sustainable. And we have to look at how we can develop the public transport sector to be more attractive, to play our role to solve the challenges that we have, including on workers, staff shortage. And and I can only tell for Europe to please keep working with cities and with our sector so we can find solutions together. I will put in the chat a link to a website we have about public transport benefits. You will see many of the benefits that we can bring to cities and for public policy goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annika, for your comments and indeed for some of the messages you sent, you conveyed. That also the importance of empowering cities and local authorities, supporting them. Also the question of lacking staff to support also public the usage of public transport. The importance of supporting also. Providing additional support when it comes to infrastructure. Also echoing to some extent also what we heard from the previous speakers thus far. So good to see that there are some interlinkages between the different stakeholders as to the challenges and solutions we need to seek after. Thank you. And now I would like to go back to the panelists based on all what we heard from other panelists and also from the respondents. I would like to go back to Pablo and hear if you would like to share any additional reflections also from what we heard thus far. I would also have some specific questions, but first I wanted to see if you have anything else to add on top of your initial intervention.
Yes, now I'm muted, I think. You hear me now? Yes? Yep. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to react. I mean, there was a lot of very interesting interventions from colleagues. And often I cannot agree more on what has been said from the very last comments on labor shortages. ASEA was mentioned to the lack of skilled workers, but we also are lacking drivers, and this is a huge issue, and I cannot agree more on this. And we definitely need to have a close look to this. A very general remark when it comes to transport. Transport, yes, we use transport often for leisure, but transport, people commute, people use transport meet, companies use transport meet not just for the fun of it. They use it because it's the backbone of our economies. So it's a critical element. It's a catalyzer also of growth. But when it comes to avoiding transport, there we'll be very cautious. I think we need to be extremely cautious about that. Because this is also linked to the social acceptance of our proposal. So if we are beginning now to tell people not to travel, this is going to be heavily contested. So what we need to do from the European Commission point of view is to make the alternatives available, make the system be ready with the infrastructure that is needed, make it accessible and affordable, and reduce the impact of CO2 of traveling. That's not easy, but we think that by avoiding travel, that will not work. So then when it comes to a modal shift, because I've heard, I think it was Thomas who mentioned that there has been no attention. I mean, the point of the part of the Commission is that all modes of transport are necessary. Rail is a very sustainable mode of transport, but rail does not work everywhere. It's expensive. In some parts, it will not be economically feasible. So and the last mile, Miriam, I think, pointed out very well. You know, we will not work without a van delivering your parcel. So we need to work on all fronts. We can't just rely on rail transport. But let me just remind colleagues of the number of actions we do from the European Commission on rail. When it comes to connecting your facility, which is the main instruments we use from the DG Move and our portfolio, more than 80% of the actions are dedicated to connect to rail. Let's not forget that. The Recovery and Resilience Fund, 46 billion euros have been dedicated to rail. So there is a massive support from the European Commission to rail. When it comes to trans-European networks, a lot of improvement have been done in the agreement reached by the co-legislator in December. We are shifting to RTMS. We're establishing standards in terms of speed of 100 kilometers per hour for freight, 160 for transport, for passenger transport. We're introducing standards to make it much more multimodal. So there is a huge attention from the European Commission to try to promote more sustainable modes, which is not just rail, but it's also inland waterways. But of course, those are not available everywhere. We've also done a huge amount of work in terms of providing alternatives to the few alternatives that exist today to aviation and maritime when it comes to their fuels. Again, we will always need airplanes to cross the Atlantic, to go to Asia, to reach a long distance. So what we need to do is provide the right alternatives, and when it comes to those two modes in particular, those are the main hurdle. It's the fuels, where we don't have currently an alternative. As I said before, when it comes to the Green Deal, I think a lot of legislation has been put in place during the last years. We're still finalizing some of the files. It is now time to implement. It will not be easy because this is not just one, it's about legislation, it's about member states implementing it, it's about deploying the rollout of the infrastructure. It will not be easy. And this is, I think Steph put it very rightly, we need first support from the population. We need also support from, we need the industry to follow. And this is why we should not forget that, for instance, on the CO2 for light duty vehicles, we are asking for a major shift we are January 2024, in 10 years, major shift. So I do agree that accelerating it could be good, but we need to have the infrastructure in place. We need to have the vehicles that are accessible to, for instance, when it comes to the lorry, to the truck segment, 98% of them are SMEs. So we need to make those available at the right price. So we need to really be careful that both industry and citizens follow, that we make vehicles accessible at the right price. And when I mentioned in my initial remarks that I was forgetting a couple of initiatives, one of them was the fleet initiative, which Steph rightly pointed. We are, and this was a compromise. I mean, this was a commitment by Executive Vice President Šefčovič when he was in the Parliament in October, when he was confirmed in the hearing that we would, as Commission, think about a potential initiative on car fleets. And this is why in a couple of weeks we will be launching an open public consultation. Whether we will end up with what will be the final outcome is to be seen. We are looking for input from the sector, from car manufacturers, from leasing companies, from all kinds of stakeholders. So I invite all of you to participate, to show to present your views on this, and obviously the Commission will follow its better regulation procedures, which is analyzing the impact of any potential measure. I've heard from I was listening very carefully to Miriam when she was presenting the pledges of Amazon. There I wouldn't be so pessimistic as Steph. I think that a lot of big important economic players are willing to make a shift, and that's important. But also we need to look when it comes to fleets, for instance, that not everybody is the same. Not everybody has the same. The fleets are different, rental companies, leasing companies, and when we go to the professional sector, the reality it's very different. And first and foremost, we need to, whenever we shift to electric, we need to have the infrastructure and the power. I mean, the question of the power goes a bit out of my pay grade, but I agree. I mean, we need to have a sufficient green, let's say, sufficient renewable and sustainable energy to provide that power that it will be required. But I don't want to continue more. I think I've more or less responded to some of the comments that were directly or indirectly intended to the Commission, but happy to continue and respond to any specific questions you had.
Thank you very much, Pablo, for your reactions to what was said thus far. We also maybe this is a long shot, but let's see if there is anything that maybe could be shared on this question that we received, which is, in a way, brings in more like also geopolitics a bit into the game when we talk about the shift to sustainable transport. And the question was about if we talk about also linked to industrial agenda, as was also discussed mentioned by Steph, and it's about the investments into the batteries and for example, the role of external actors, and that namely what we got from the question is that we risk that this new industry ends up being mostly owned by, for example, Chinese companies, and that brings in the question of dependencies and the importance of resilience and strategic autonomy when we talk about this shift. So I don't know, Pablo, if there is anything you could share with us at this point, how we factor in this element in an, let's say, increasingly more geopolitical world we live in.
Very briefly, I think the question is very pertinent, and yes, there is a risk that I mean, reducing our dependency of fuel. It's not just a question of climate change. It's also reducing our dependency from a very limited number of oil producers, and we've seen this with the Russian aggression, for instance, that prices of gas and fuel have rocketed, and so I cannot agree more than we should not replace one dependency with another. And I think the Commission in the last years has done a good job in terms of trying to produce in Europe, when it comes to batteries, sustainable production of batteries in Europe. And this is I think the added value of Europe, but that we're not just producing batteries, we're producing, and we're aiming to produce sustainable batteries when it comes to the origin of the raw materials, when it comes to, and also I think, I can't remember, but who pointed out that, you know, having this business developed here also reduces emissions because they're produced locally close to where we are. And so again, I agree much on the statement. When it comes to solutions, it's a complex subject. There is a lot of elements that come in, but I cannot agree more than that. What we should not be working is towards replacing one dependency we have currently on fuel producers to cheap, non-sustainable battery manufacturers.
Thank you for your reflections on this. And just a short question. I mean, you already reflected upon it a little bit, but just if there is anything to add when it comes to multimodal transport. There was a specific question by David Garcia, if the Commission is still planning to propose the multimodal digital mobility service initiative, and on the questions on going beyond data sharing and introducing open ticketing services for passengers. Is there anything that you could maybe share anything more on top of what was already discussed?
Sure. Here, very quickly, as I said, the European Commission and I think the stakeholders appreciate very much, but also the other institutions. We are based on better regulation principles, which is all the proposals needs to be thoroughly consulted with the public, with the stakeholders, but also impact assess, you know. And the problem with the MDMS proposal is that it's brand new legislation. It's multimodal. It goes a bit. It's a novelty because often we propose legislation in silos, and so here we are combined. And here we found difficulties in this internal process of the European Commission when doing impact assessment. So we're still working on it. It's not that we have not forgotten about it and we will not do it. It's just that we're trying to come to the college with the right tools and to the right proposal, which is still not mature. However, let me just highlight that the MDMS it's part of our policy towards promoting multimodality, but we are doing a whole bunch of other proposals that go in the same direction. Let me just, for instance, mention one we did at end of November. If we want passengers to change modes and use combinations of, for instance, of rail, buses, and replace, for instance, a short-haul flight. There, we need also consumers to be attractive to those, and consumers will only be attractive if we protect them when traveling and when changing modes of transport. So the Commission has proposed a new brand regulation protecting consumer rights when you shift modes of transport. This is, for instance, something we presented end of November. Let's also acknowledge that it's not that we operate in a vacuum. Currently, we also have competition rules, which allow us to tackle some of the problems we are willing to address with the MDMS. And I want to refer recently to a decision that was taken yesterday, a commitment by the European Commission with Renfe, the Spanish rail operator, to open their ticketing information to third parties, so that precisely consumers can have a greater choice. So these are two examples. I can provide much more of those, but I think it's David who that did that question. I think he got a very concise response to what he was asking.
No, perfect. Thank you so much for sharing this these updates. I think very interesting, also very useful for our speakers and participants. Thank you. And Steph, I see you have your hand raised, so happy to hear from you.
Great. Yes, thank you very much, Stefan. I'll try to be brief in my replies. There's actually 3 topics I would like to focus on that were also mentioned before. So let me start with China and batteries. I think this is indeed a very important issue. As Pablo already mentioned, the war in Ukraine has shown how vulnerable we can be when we are very dependent on sole suppliers. But I think when you look on batteries, first of all, it's important still to underline that competition is good. Competition leads to better prices and to better products. That foreign investment in Europe is something that we should welcome, but it is indeed true that we should try, and also with batteries, to make sure that we bring the production to Europe. That doesn't mean it should only be for European companies, but it should be made in Europe products. I think that is really important to underline. Now, however, on the other hand, that if competition is unfair, and if the Commission's investigation would show that competition is unfair, then of course measures such as tariffs, for example, against targeted towards batteries and battery manufacturing outside Europe, should definitely be considered. At the same time, we also can still do more efforts in Europe to continue to support battery manufacturing here by, for example, more targeted subsidies. And one of the best ways to do that is to really look for blending, where you also integrate private investment. So I think on that front we can do more, but at the same time, invest in Europe, make sure that we bring investment to Europe. And if competition is unfair, I think we should definitely consider action and measures. Then 2 more points I want to touch upon that were also discussed previously. So first of all, with regards to the fleets initiative. So Pablo, I very much welcome what you just said, and that the public consultation will be opened soon. Look very much forward to that. I think with regards to what companies are doing already. So first of all, of course, also Miriam, these pledges of companies, that's something that we of course welcome, and it's really important that companies send this signal. But especially when you look at the car segment, and it's also represented today, the numbers just show that the company car segment is actually not pulling its weight at the moment, and that we see that in France, where you have voluntary targets for fleets. We see actually that more than 60% of the fleets are not meeting the targets because they are voluntary. So I think this is a signal also when we think about Europe, what we will do here. At the same time, I understand the sector is different. There are different players, rental, leasing, corporate cars, and so on. But there, for example, I think a smart proposal and, for example, focusing also on the leasing companies can be a very, very effective approach here. My last point is about affordability and public acceptance. I think this is indeed a really, really important point, and I think it's also really encouraging and great that actually many, if not all of us, have actually referred to this topic during our interventions. What Peter said, I believe improving charging, make sure that we have more smart charging, that the grid is becoming smarter, that actually the consumer can get everything out of the EV by charging when the prices are at the lowest point, by also allowing bi-directional charging. I think there's still a lot of potential there to make sure that the consumer can really reap the benefits, also the financial benefits of that EV. And at the moment, that is not really the case. So there, I think still a lot of work, or still a lot of potential is still on the table. And then another point I wanted to stress is that with regards to public acceptance, the challenge indeed, in 10 years, 100% zero emissions. So the challenge is high, the pace will be high. There, I think it's going to be really important to make sure that we really communicate that we want strong shoulders to carry the burden of the higher upfront costs of a technology shift. And there, the Commission looking into fossil fuel subsidies, but also making sure that companies and also fleets, again, I'm now mostly referring to cars, are leading the way. I think this is a really important signal, an important signal that you can send as politicians to say, okay, we want the companies to lead the way, and that the consumer, the private consumer, they can reap the benefits. One last point is also the social climate fund. I think also here we need to see how this can be used to make e-mobility affordable to the ones who really need it. We really need to make sure that support goes to the ones who need it. I wouldn't say a company car driver who can afford a 60,000 euro company car is really the one who should get the benefit. So we can think about social leasing schemes that France has now introduced. Is that something that we can think about also on a European level, use the revenue of the social climate funds to set something up like this on a European level? I think these political signals are extremely important to make sure, that we don't lose support. So far from my side, thank you.
Thank you very much, Steph, for your additional reflections on this topic. And Miriam, any comments from your side?
Yes, so I wouldn't like to repeat what my colleague said. I will pick up on digitalisation and how it can actually drive more pace, taking on what Peter said. So definitely we are entering in a world that is more and more digital. And when I talk about electric vehicles, I normally myself said it's a computer on wheels, because that's how it interacts with the chargers, with the grid. If we really want to have that smartness across the network, digitalisation is going to be a key player. And all this transition is going to require a lot of investment, or we are seeing already it requires a lot of investment. I'm going to focus on the infrastructure and the power, but how much of that investment can be a smart investment if we use digitalisation to understand from an holistic point of view, from a European point of view, where those charge points and those strategic locations for charge point needs to be located. I think what I was in my opening statement, I was talking about kind of a standardization and looking at the challenge from an holistic point of view. What if we could, as Europe, create a strategic map of where the transportation network operators will need those charge points instead of working in silos and making investment more difficult? So because we, as Amazon, we need for the middle mile to understand where those charge point needs to be. We actually built a digital tool that actually, with the information from the tracks, the route length, the battery information, we can understand where the drivers will need to stop and charge. We thought that was an important tool that everyone can use, and we actually made it open source. And now the Sustainable Freight Buyers Alliance, that is an independent alliance, is using that to actually create that strategic mapping of infrastructure location. I think alternative or initiatives like this can really make sure that we acknowledge there is a big investment, but can we make those investments smart, and can we make them like at the end of the day, it's like smart. It's like can make them happen faster because there is more clarity and certainty on when the need is going to sit.
Thank you very much, Miriam. And actually, indeed, the digitalization was exactly the question I wanted to follow up with. So thanks for elaborating upon that. And looking at the time, we have 3 more minutes left. So what I would like to do is like to give just a chance to all of our speakers for a brief message, 1 or 2 sentences on the key messages for the way forward. Again, going back to Pablo for your key message for today. I think we don't hear you, actually.
Okay, now.
Yes, now
Yeah.
we hear you. Yeah.
Key messages is we've done ahead of during the 4 last years. Now it's time to implement. So and here we need to work very closely all together with member states, with and with industry as well, and having the public as well supporting this transition is essential. A very quick word as well on urban, because I forgot to mention that, and Annika made very, very valid points. Urban, it's true, is where a lot of the emissions take place. It's a lot of where interaction takes place. However, the Commission here is a bit in a difficulty because this is subsidiarity. This is mostly a responsibility of regions and local authorities who know best, but they need support, and this is why from the European Commission it's true that until now we've been a bit shy on intervening on the urban environment, but you would have seen, for instance, with the Times, the 10T proposal, that we want to go a bit more in deep into that. But it's challenging. It's even more challenging because it's a question of subsidiarity. But another element that I would like to highlight, it's transport. I said it before, is the skeleton of our economy. So we need to be extremely careful when intervening into this sector, because otherwise we will not get our deliveries at home. We will not get our parcels from Amazon, and we will not be able to commute, and we will not be able to enjoy some of key fundamental freedoms of the European Union. So this is also a message that I wanted to pass with my intervention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pablo. And Steph, any brief message for the end? But although I see that there is a connection issue, apparently, so we will see if there will still be a chance. Steph, we don't really hear you. So, but now
I know. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we do. If you now we do. If you have any, let's say, quick message for the end.
Yeah, I will try. I hope the connection is stable.
For now, it is.
Okay, well, then I just want to underline that I think that the challenges is this triangle between climate, social, and industrial, and I think there the implementation of the Green Deal will bring us forward, but we need additional measures that are smart. And there I think more initiatives on fleets, but also industrial policy to make sure battery production will move to Europe, but also that we continue to upgrade the grids where there's still a lot of room for improvement, are important additional factors that we need to where we need to make further progress.
Thank you very much, Steph and Miriam.
2 seconds. So it's been great to participate and see that we share the common vision, and I think this is what citizens we all deserve to see in the incoming years in the future. But now it is time to see the implementation. So we are really committed from the industry. We really need to see this regulatory framework happening in all the member states.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Miriam. I just wanted to check in 1 sentence very briefly if any of the respondents would like to add anything, but yeah, I'm looking at Annika maybe, or Peter, yes? But yeah, just to make it very short, but to give you the chance if you still want to add anything.
Yeah, if I may, just very simple. I think that's triangular was very important to mention to keep the balance. And okay, I think many of you mentioned we fully support. Okay, I think that's such a legislative avalanche that we all had recent years. I think that we can really take a break. No further regulation, and just focus really how to do that and how we can we deliver. I think the targets are clear. We all know what we want to do, but really we need to focus how to do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. And Annika?
Yeah, if I may, I think what we should look at in the next years is how we can improve the public transport offer locally and in the regions, and how to combine it better with other alternative modes, because that will allow us to decarbonize daily mobility to a large extent if people have clean alternatives. And I think, yeah, we are ready to do that and to discuss it with the European institutions as well.
Thank you, Annika. And Toma, any last messages from the cities?
Maybe one last statement from me. So just look at what's happening in cities when it comes to transport. I think there are very interesting developments happening at the local level that may also inspire other levels of governance. And if you see where we were in many cities 5 years ago and where we stand now, I think it's a great source of inspiration. So look ahead.
Thank you very much for this final remarks for today. But indeed, a big topic to cover, and of course, something that we will continue to follow because it's a long way still ahead. Although, notwithstanding that a lot has been done, indeed, we still need to do a lot to implement the current strategy and to really create our mobility system, transport system, which is truly smart, sustainable, secure, just, resilient. And we need the regulation, we need investments, and we need to work together between different stakeholders, the governments, the business community, civil society, to make this transition happen. So I would like to thank all of our speakers for their very interesting and very valuable inputs, and also to our participants for taking part in this discussion, for your questions, and very much looking forward to seeing you again at our events in the future. Thank you once again, and have a nice day.